What is going on, guys? This is MCS Red here again with a video on how to love and cherish your 468. I'm totally kidding. This is a video about understanding your 468, how it works, functionality, and also troubleshooting. One of the biggest things that I see day to day, and you'll probably see it on the internet, on Facebook, forums and things like that, there's a lot of questions surrounding the 468, and a lot of people purchase the 468 strictly because of its looks. I mean, it's a badass marker, don't get me wrong. A lot of people like that AR-15 look, the functionality, that one-to-one scale. People like that. So I don't blame them for purchasing it. But the biggest problem that we see here at MCS is that the 468 is not understood. There's a lot of things about it that people don't understand, including the lock bolt, the anti-ball drop, different types of hand guards compatibility, the upper and lower receiver, trigger, the sear, etc. All these parts, and I can tell you I get a lot of support emails and things like that with made up parts that I've never even heard of. Like, can I get the latch handle spring coupler? Stuff like that. People making up a lot of different parts. So in this video, I'm going to go through the updated 468 with you. So when you receive it, and if you ever have any problems with your 468, you'll be able to troubleshoot them pretty easily, and you'll understand the issues and exactly on how to fix them or solve the problems. So here is a 468. This is a 468 RIS, which is the most basic copy. If you get Special Forces model or any other specialty, like Unicus gun, limited edition 468, it doesn't matter. The internal structure of the 468 will always remain the same. The only difference will most likely be the cosmetic accessories that you see on the system itself. So whether it's the buttstock, the remote line adapter, handguard or barrel, etc. The extended trigger frame is, magazine well is out now. So that's an upgraded piece as well, but it does not change at all. The way that it attaches to the receiver is the same. The way that it functions is the same as well. So your 468. First off, when you get your 468, whenever you're going to do tech work on it, you make sure you remove your air source. Whether it's a remote line or anything like that, you don't want air on this unit at all. What I like to do is I make sure I charge a charging handle back. One thing that I always get on the 468 is people think that when it gets to this point, that it's charged back. That noise right here that you're hearing, that's not charged back. So when you can't pull it back anymore, it actually goes another quarter pull, and that's charging it back. If you're able to do this and you don't hear it lock back, that means it's already in the locked position. It's ready to fire. So you heard that click, go back, do it again. That will be your audible, and then ultimately you'll be able to feel it, physical indication that the unit is ready to fire. So we'll go ahead and take the magazine out, and we will go ahead and take off the tank. So you heard that degassing noise. That means, and it's an indication that the marker is now safe. So whenever we take apart or open the receivers, you want to make sure it's cocked back. And the reason for that is because, and I'm going to explain it to you here with the pieces. When you cock the marker back, this charging handle is connected to your bolt. Whether you have a 2017 version or 2016 or earlier, either the Javelin or the white bolt, it's the same exact thing. It's actually cocking, it's connected to that bolt, it's moving it backwards to allow the striker to reset behind the sear. Now, just to go through this with you, you have a trigger pack. The trigger is connected by one screw here and then one in this hole right here. Undoing those screws can take this trigger frame all the way off, so you can do your tech work for your trigger in there. These pins on the trigger frame, which is one right here, and one under there, are for the trigger and the sear. So popping out those pins allows, there's two, one for the trigger and one for the sear. You can see it better on this side actually. So you have 1 and 2. And those two pins are for your sear and your trigger. So if you ever want to, if you need to replace the trigger, you need to replace the sear or sear spring, etc., you have to pop that pin out. Now, the pins on the 468, one side has a knurling and another side is just flat. The side with the knurling, and you'll be able to tell when you look at the hole, like both of these pins here on this 468, both of the knurling is on this side of the marker. So that means you're going to want to hit using a punch or Allen key of some sort, anything that will fit in that hole that's strong enough to withstand the impact, to hit it out from that side. Then the knurling will pop out from that. When you put the pins back in, you need to put the pins with the flat side first through the knurling side, and then you could go ahead and hit them down with a rubber mallet. Tools that I think are important to have when teching the 468 would be 1, a rubber mallet, 2, a hex set, and then 3, a flathead or Phillips head screwdriver. More commonly than not, I only use the screwdrivers for picking and prodding at things, really, or even just helping hammer some stuff in. But most of the stuff on here is just like your standard AR, so everything's going to have a hex key, and or it's going to be a push pin. So let's go ahead and open up the receiver and make sure the charging handle is charged back. There's a rear takedown pin right here. Just go ahead and you can close this down. I like to hold it like this. I put my thumb under that area there, pull it down, and push out the pin just in case there's a little resistance. The newer your 468 is, the more resistance you'll most likely have, but don't worry, that'll break in over time. So here we have the receiver open. I have my bolt, and I'm gonna go ahead and remove the front takedown pin. You can just move it up and down, that will pop out, and then you'll go ahead and you can just shake this back and forth. Now I have my upper receiver here and my lower receiver here. Let's go with the upper receiver first, because we do get a lot of questions about that. The 2017 468s and the difference between them of the 2016 or earlier is the multi-piece upper. Now, before, a lot of people didn't even actually notice that there were multi-pieces on the upper. They always thought that it was a one-piece upper. So what we did is, when we created the Javelin, we didn't anticipate there being a big issue with the lock bolt assembly. And what we used to do in the 2016 version is that this part right here, which is the lock bolt, which is the mechanical eye, which I'll be talking about in this video, was actually separate from the upper receiver. So it actually, you had one piece of the receiver, which was cut right here. So you had the receiver end, and then you had the top rail, which is still attached by 2 screws on the top. Those were all separate pieces. So you would take your lock bolt and your upper receiver, and then you would clamp them. They would go into each other. The lock bolt would go into the upper receiver, and then you close it. Then you take your top rail and your charging handle, and you would slide that over the top of it and attach it to your top screws. So the front screw would attach and lock the lock bolt assembly in place, and the back screw would actually attach all of it together to the receiver, the rest of the upper receiver here. So what we found with the Javelin bolt, and the reason why it was problematic with Shape Projectiles, was because the Javelin bolt is stainless steel, which compared to the Delrin bolt, which we know can pretty much do and blast through anything, it didn't have a lot of give. And because of this metal receiver as well, metal on metal don't usually work well. So that's the reason why we created the one-piece upper. And the one-piece upper allows for that having to make sure that chamber is completely spherical, and eliminating that completely. So now you don't have to worry about it. That's why the Javelin, the one-piece upper, works so well now with Shape Projectiles and just with cycling and air efficiency. So if you have a 2016 edition, and you're trying to use the Shape or the Javelin, it may or may not be problematic for you, depending on the generation of 468 that you have, and then ultimately how well and worn in your marker is. I've had people that have used the Javelin, both Gen 1 and the Gen 2 now, and have had no problems, and I also have people who bought it and have had terrible problems. So If you're looking to use shape projectiles, we always recommend the one-piece upper and the Javelin, which is the Gen 2 version. Before we move forward, the difference between the bolts and the generations is one, this is your standard white bolt, which we have on the 2016 models with the one-piece bolt pin. Back in the day, we used to have a two-piece bolt pin, which means one piece would go here, another piece would go into that area, and then you would attach, or you would tighten it down with both of these set screws. Well, now we just made one, it goes in through one side, which would be this side, and then you just go ahead and tighten it down, which was a better system. It was more reinforced, and you didn't have to worry about losing those pieces if that set screw ever got loose. So the Delrin bolt was designed, because, and you can tell by all of these tracks and cuts and slits here, especially at the end of the bolt here. A lot of people ask like, oh, it's damaged, blah, blah, blah. It's actually the way that it was supposed to be. And the reason why we made it like this is so it could blast through broken paint, pieces of paint, and continue firing and cycling perfectly fine. So what would happen was if you got a jam, that paint would just go through these channels on this bolt, and it wouldn't affect the cycling. Nothing would jam this up because of that metal receiver and the plastic bolt. It would just be able to plow through any debris or anything like that. So that's the reason why this was actually designed that way. So a lot of people didn't know that, but now you do. So the white bolt works great with round projectiles, paintballs, anything like that. And then the Javelin is definitely for those who want to use shape projectiles and or round projectiles. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about the history of why we created the one-piece upper and its differences between the old, we can go into the next part. So the Riz and the 468 is compatible with mil-spec handguards, and what that means is, as you can see here, you can see like a little bit of a gap. See, you can kind of see my face through those slits there, and what we call that, it's called free floating. Free floating means that the barrel actually floats, it looks like it floats, inside of a handguard. There are tons, probably thousands of different types of handguards that are considered free floating, and they are all compatible with the 468 as long as they're mil-spec. So this handguard is the basic Riz. We offer these for the Blizzard and the Bolt and even the Vortex with the mil-spec barrel adapter. They're all the same. What it is, there's threading at the end of the receiver here. And you can see on this insert right here, this little doorway all the way around is an insert. And what we call that is a barrel nut. The barrel nut allows you to use handguards like this. So a lot of companies that manufacture handguards, both for ARs or anything, will usually have a proprietary barrel nut that will be required for their handguard, which it usually comes with it. But if that doesn't, then you always have to look into that. This barrel nut that we offer, our mil-spec barrel nut, is for our Riz handguards. And what you would do is you would just go ahead and screw that on, use an AR wrench, tighten it down, and then attach the Riz via set screws right here, right here, right here, and right here. So you have actually 8 total set screws that actually attach the handguard over that barrel nut. And all it does is just slide on, then you line it up and you make sure that it's straight, so that way when you put your optics or your sights on there, they'll actually line up. And that's it. That is what constitutes a free floating handguard. And then, like I said, you'll be able to change barrels very quickly without having to take off the handguard. And back in the old days in the T68 and the 468, we actually used to have barrel mounted Riz handguards. And what that was just you inserted the barrel, you tightened it down, and then you had a barrel insert, which is similar to a barrel nut, but it would attach to the barrel. So there would actually be set screw holes on the barrel nut, or insert, I'm sorry, and then once this barrel was in, you would just push or put the barrel nut all the way down and actually tighten onto the barrel. And a lot of people didn't like that because, one, it always damaged your barrel because the set screws were setting into the barrel, and then 2, in order for you to change your barrel, you had to take off all the handguard, the insert, and the barrel completely, and then do it piece by piece again. So a lot of people didn't like that. So if you're looking for that quick change compatibility, then you always want to go with that free floating handguard that we offer. And like I said, the Vortex, the Blizzard, and the Bolt are all compatible with that. You just need the mil-spec barrel adapter. So that's about it for the upper receiver. Oh, actually no, just kidding. The lock bolt. So a lot of people, this is one of the most misunderstood parts of the 468. The lock bolt is the mechanical eye. This was something that Omar designed with KT to allow the marker to fire only when a projectile was properly seated and engaging that lock bolt. So that's all this is. This isn't a detent. The detent is actually already in there, and it's on this door right here. So you have one door right here and another one on the other side. And the 468 only has one detent. It only needs one ball detent, and it's always on the left-hand side of the marker. So if you unscrew this Allen key right here, and you actually take off that door, there'll be a ball detent. And you can kind of see it up in that area right here. And that's the only ball detent that you need. So the lock bolt, its primary job is to help you not jam or break paint. And that's all it really does. So just to show you here, you're going to be able to see, you see that silver tab in this window right here. Well, when the magazine is inserted into the magwell, the projectile travels through this feed collar, which is this D-shaped area here. And what it does, it engages, and you can see that lock bolt actually pushing up and down in the square window up there. When it's all engaging that lock bolt correctly, like my finger is right now, that will allow the bolt, which I'll show you here visually. Put this in here. So if I go ahead and I put my finger through up like that, and I allow, like, pretend that the projectile is here, you will see that white thing right there? That is our bolt. So the bolt, see how it now cannot go in because that tab, that silver tongue is down? That is because there isn't anything engaging this lock bolt correctly. So that is the reason why we designed it that way. And it's completely normal that happens. If you ever, like earlier in the video when I dry fired the unit and you actually heard that clicking noise, that is because there's nothing engaging that lock bolt to allow the bolt to move forward. So if you ever want to dry fire the 468, and you shouldn't and you don't need to, but if you decide you want to, what you would have to do is you would just go ahead and engage that with the marker all fully assembled, of course, and then you'll see, if you see right there in the square window right here above the rectangular one, you would just take an Allen key or anything small enough to keep that lock bolt tongue up. Then at that point you would be able to dry fire the unit, and you would be able to cycle and make sure that it's working correctly. So that's the lock bolt. That is a design and something that you would want for yourself. It's completely mechanical, so you don't have to worry about electronics or anything like that, which makes the 468 a force to be reckoned with when it comes to the AR platform, because it is mechanical. So let's move on to the lower receiver here. So the lower receiver, you have your magazine well, which comes off, and I'm going to show you that right now, just so we can tap this through. What I like to do is I'll just take, sometimes you can even use the tank as a piece to push out this pin. Go ahead and pull this out, and this may be a little tough, but you'll be able to get it. So here's your magazine well, here's your anti-ball drop. Now the anti-ball drop does require grease on both sides. There's two little springs on each side of here, and what it does is it allows this to open and close smoothly. If you get dirt or mud or anything in there, or water, and it rusts those springs, chances are this isn't going to work as flawlessly as it should. So, anti-ball drop, what is it? The anti-ball drop, because we created this unit to be a law enforcement training tool, a lot of officers were upset that when they released the magazine, two projectiles would actually come out and hit the ground. So that wasn't very realistic, nor when they're spending money and they have to count every dollar and every cent, having and losing projectiles on the ground during training is not cost effective. So that is the reason why the anti-ball drop is created. So what it does is that when it's sitting in the magazine here and it's connected to that pin, when the magazine goes, there's no magazine in there, it's actually tilted like this. Okay, you can see that like my finger. But when you push the magazine up and it's tilted and it pushes it, it becomes straight. And so this tongue that's right here is actually on a track in the magwell, and you can kind of see that track there, that white stuff around us, grease. And what that does is when that goes up the track, it actually opens that D thing, just like the size of that feed port that we saw there earlier. So right here you can see that it will not actually allow the projectile to move forward because it's not completely open. You can see that there at the bottom. So when I go ahead and I push that, boom, now it opens. So that allows the projectile to actually go into the marker flawlessly. So that is what the anti-ball drop does. It's completely normal. And then ultimately, when I release the magazine, and if there's projectiles that are still in the breech, they will leave them in the magwell. So there'll be one right here and then another one somewhat or halfway into the breech. That is why whenever you load paintballs or projectiles into your 468 and you're about to play, I always recommend loading 2 projectiles, either it's paint or shape projectiles, into that breech before you insert a complete mag. That way you get your full 20 rounds all the time. Otherwise, if you just fill up the magazine and then you insert it into the mag well, you're only going to actually get 18 rounds. There's going to be 2 left over. So it's always in your best interest when you play, just insert 2 projectiles into that anti-ball drop, and that will solve that problem for you. So now that you know what that does, you can go ahead and set that aside. Here's your lower receiver. So you have a valve cover here, which is this actually is where the magazine well is attached, and the anti-ball drop uses a spring to move it back up and down like I was telling you earlier. And there's also in the front here your poppet spring, your brass valve, and that's it. And poppet pin actually too. So everything that allows the marker to, the 468 I should say, to cycle is right here, this little area right here. And what this does is allows the air to be held until you press the trigger. So in the back, in this window right here, what you have is you're going to have a locking pin, which you just press and pull out, which is this piece right here. And then you'll be able to get to your internals. So as you can see here, there's nothing in that chamber. You can see that gold part all the way down at the end of that chamber is your brass valve. There's a pin keeping it from entering the cycling chamber, which is a good thing. And then there is a pin here at the front. Same thing. Remember I was talking to you about it earlier about the pins that have knurling. All of these pins that you have to pop out of this system are the 468 have knurling. So you have to look at what side has it. If you see one side that doesn't have any knurling or anything like that, then that's obviously on the opposite side. And you'll want to remove the pin from that knurling side. So if the knurling on this is on the right hand, in this video it's going to be on your left hand, but on my right hand here, I will go ahead and I will hit the pin out from that flat side so it exits that way and I don't damage that. If you try to go the opposite way, that knurling's going to get caught up on everything that it's trying to pass through and it's not going to work. So you always go through the path of least resistance. So there's your lower. You should never have to get into the poppet or anything like that unless you have a leaking issue or you get some type of mud or debris into that hole or the cycling chamber and you want to clean it out. You can definitely do that. Other than that, you really should not have to do it. We test and build the markers here in Gilroy. right before they are sent out to you. So we know that there aren't any leaks or anything like that, so you shouldn't have to get into that point or into that area. But if you want to, you know how to now. Once you take out that pin, this is actually spring loaded, so you're going to want to hold it with your hand and then just pull it out gently, and then that pop it and everything will come out. In order to get the brass valve out, which is that gold piece in there, you actually have to take a rod of some sort, anything small enough, long Allen key, and push it out because it has O-rings around it and it has to seal that entire front chamber here. So the parts that I took out of the rear, this is your striker or hammer, your velocity spring, and your velocity guide pin, which is adjustable, and your velocity guide housing. Then you also have this rubber piece here, which is a buffer. Now, the 468 is modeled after a Spyder stack system. So for those of you who are familiar with Spyder and markers and how they work, you'll know that this is exactly pretty much the same thing. So what you have here is, if you want to adjust the velocity on the 468, you use this pin. You screw it out to increase the velocity, you screw it in to decrease the velocity. Your hammer, or striker is what we call it, is a very important part of this system. This O-ring at the end actually seals the chamber and allows the bolt, which is the part that we talked about earlier, I'll get it out for you, to cycle. So when you close the receiver, this the thicker end of the pin actually goes inside of that striker, and both of these work together to fire the projectile. So this part is on the lower receiver, this part is in the upper receiver. And when you close that, these holes need to align, and so that pin can go in there, and every single time you press the trigger, it will allow the bolt to move back and forth and fire the projectile. So this is a very important part. If you're having cycling issues, the most common thing that I see with this piece is no one is oiling this O-ring. Now, the O-rings that are used for the striker or hammer are just common tank O-rings, but they need to be those tank O-rings, because if you put a black O-ring on there, the consistency and its basically genetic makeup on how it's made is most likely not for that chamber. So what's either going to happen is it's not going to seal correctly, and you're actually going to have air escaping, and it's probably just going to burp fire or fully auto fire because it's not able to seal. And then, or two, as soon as it moves and it makes contact with that lower receiver, it might just shred itself and actually jam or create issues with this striker. So make sure that when you're doing maintenance or you're replacing O-rings, you pay attention to the O-rings that you're taking off from us here at the factory, because we put them on there for a reason. So more commonly than not, you have your velocity spring, and velocity springs change, and they differ depending on the bolt that you're using as well as the upper receiver. So with the Gen 2 Javelin, you're going to get yourself a gold spring, or the Spyder spring set basically is what we use now. But you'll have to contact us directly if you're having issues. But if you get it from the factory, just keep in mind it was tested, it was built, and we did not ship it out to you without those quality control standards being met. So if you have high velocity problems or low velocity issues, just contact us directly or contact me directly, and I will get that sorted out for you. Okay? So right now, you see all the parts that we have here. It's quite a plethora of stuff. But what we can do is we'll go ahead and reassemble this unit. So the most common issues, like I was saying earlier, that I see with the 468 are miscycling, or burp firing is what we call it, where it'll go brr, brr, and that's most commonly due to the striker O-ring either being damaged and or not lubricated. So you always want to do that first before you contact us regarding that. The other issue I see sometimes is leaking from the front of the magwell or the rear of the lower receiver right here. And that's common because of these two set screws, and they're actually identical here on the front once you take the valve cover off. And what happens is those set screws actually seal air in this whole lower chamber. So what you'll hear sometimes is that Teflon just deteriorated or there's not enough, what will happen is you'll hear a small hiss or leak. All you need to do is just take out that set screw, apply some more Teflon, and then insert them back in. You should be good to go. Other than that, that's the most common issues that I see usually with the 468. I don't really see anything else outside of that. But we'll go ahead and get this reassembled, and that way you'll be able to see exactly how I do it from bottom all the way back up to top. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll put in the striker, and we want to make sure that the O-ring is inserted first with the hole facing upwards. And so you're going to get to this point, you're not going to be able to push it anymore. So what you'll have to do is just keep pressing the trigger until you hear that click, and it will allow the striker to move forward. Now, as you can see, that hole is right there towards the rear. You want it to fit perfectly in that chamber because, like I said before, when we close the receiver, that pin needs to fit directly into that. It sits on there just like that. So next part to go in is I always put the velocity spring in. Then I take the buffer rubber O-ring there, and I'll put that in over the spring. And then I take my velocity guide pin and I push it down. And when you push it down, there's a groove right here in the back. The pin will actually go in, you turn it. That would be clockwise to lock it into place. Then you'll take your velocity guide housing locking pin, and you'll go ahead and put that in too. Now you have your receiver good to go. Now, the magwell, you'll go ahead and it just slides right over the top here, and there's 2 grooves on each side of the 468. You can see those right there. That actually just goes, you just pop it in, and it goes just like that. What I like to do is I'll take the anti-ball drop, make sure that it's greased and greased, and then I'll go ahead and I'll push it on the pin here, or the leaf spring is what we call it, and just line up the holes, and then we can go ahead and close that up. And you push it up, and you can see that it's exactly how it's supposed to be. It moves up and down that track very nicely, and you're good to go. Now, upper receiver, you just go ahead and pop it right here. Lock it into place. I put my bolt in. Make sure that the skinny part of the bolt pin is facing upwards. That's the part that's going to engage onto the charging handle, and then I'll go ahead and I'll close it. And what I like to do is I like to hold it like this, thumb in the magwell or in the trigger frame, and pull down, and then pull the charging handle back, and that will allow the bolt pin to actually set into the striker as long as that hole is lined up correctly. And so just to double check and make sure that it's installed and aligned up, I'll go ahead and I'll charge the charging handle back, and I will press the trigger. As you can hear, it made that clicking noise. That's an indication that the bolt is hitting the lock bolt because there's no projectiles. Obviously, there's no magazine in there, so it won't allow it to move forward. And I'll go ahead and I'll dry fire it a couple of times, especially because when I usually open the unit, I always like to lubricate with the oil I never use grease, but I always use oil, but just to lubricate the system. If I grease up the trigger pack and the trigger frame, which is where you want to use grease, that's where I'll do it as well. So other than that, that is your 468. Now, take care of her. Take care of her, because the 468 is an amazing piece of machinery in my opinion, and it does require a sensitive eye. It does require maintenance, and it does require understanding. That will not only affect and translate into a happy player and a dominant player on the field, but it'll also allow you to use this marker to its fullest potential. If you guys have any questions or concerns regarding the 468 and you have a problem that was not addressed in this video, you make sure you contact me directly, or you can reach out to us on mcsus.com. I hope to see you guys out on the field.